Hey guys, it's Adam from Loose Pixel and welcome back. I got an email this week. It was very brief, very polite, and although she didn't say a lot in it, I knew from experience that there was a lot of weight to what she was saying. It was polite and brief, but to paraphrase, she basically said, Adam, I've been at this pursuit of professional art for over 14 years. That is a long time. And she just was not experiencing the success she thought she should be achieving at this particular point in her career. And she wanted to know very simply, have I ever felt that way before in my past as well? Have I ever felt like I maybe wasn't cut out for this type of career? And of course, if you know me, if you know my stories that I share all the time on my channel, the answer was, of course, yes, I have. And I shared a couple of my own experiences where I felt this way. But it didn't end there. After I sent the email to her, I continued to think about these different experiences that I had. Her email kind of unlocked this memory library that I'm embarrassed to say I kind of forgot about. I suppose I can say I took it a bit for granted, because at this particular point in my career, now that I'm in my mid-40s, I am experiencing for the first time in my life a level of stability and constancy that I've never experienced before. I've never had this lengthy stretch of stability in my career than I have in my entire life. I founded my school back in 2015, and we're 2022 at the time of this recording, and things are going strong. And I'm very glad that her email knocked me off of my pedestal of comfort and allowed me to reflect back on all the shit I've had to dig through. All those tireless, endless days, endless years of insecurity that finally led to something clicking in a much more substantial way. And I want to share that with you today. I want to share it with you not only to offer you some perspective on what you might be going through right now in your career, what you might go through in your career. Despite finding any success, you might lose that success at a certain point, but also to share with you what it's like once you have found it, once you have reached a point where you can start to put your feet down on the ground and trust the ground you're standing on. I think it's important to have both perspectives, because without that other perspective, you can sometimes feel like it'll never come. And that's exactly how I felt for years. I felt this way for years. Just to give her a few examples, I remembered digging into my winter coat pocket, into a hole in the bottom of one of the winter coat pockets, so I could dig my finger into the lining in hopes to find some change so I could buy a cigarette up at the corner store, because I had smoked my last cigarette and I was running out and I didn't have a freaking quarter to my name. That's how broke I was. And it's not that I had been broke like that for a couple of weeks or days. No, this was months. And it grew far more challenging day after day. I knew that feeling extremely well of being on unemployment and maybe taking a couple of weeks or months off, kind of finding a little bit of security and a bit of a paycheck, albeit barely enough to get by, just so I could take a breather from a long stretch of hard work. And then watching that unemployment insurance deadline slowly creep up on me until I started to feel like it was a bit of a stranglehold around my neck, and I went into panic mode, trying to find work and trying to get my shit together again. And how I feel like maybe I had wasted too much time being comfortable and complacent and not pushing hard enough to develop the skills I needed, or to present my portfolio, or to find a sense of style, or to pursue the right studios. Despite all the experience I had, never ever feeling like I was good enough. To the portfolios that I'd purchased, the handout portfolios that I'd purchased with barely any money to my name, and building an entire repertoire of art to appeal to a studio that might want to hire me because I wanted to work there, and handing that $15, $20 portfolio with all the prints that I had to pay for at the printing shop, and handing it to the front desk, to reception, in hopes that maybe I could coax her into handing it directly to a director so I could shake somebody's hand and make my presence known. And her saying, sorry, there's nobody there right now, but I'll give it to the right person, and handing it off to her with this feeling in the back of my head from experience, I'm never going to hear back from you again. But smiling, handing it to her, and walking back out into the snow and the slush and -40 weather and taking the subway home, knowing that despite the fact that I'd spent weeks or even months building myself up to that point where I could present myself to her and hopefully get some kind of a click from that studio, nothing, not a call. I was just flat out ghosted. And this happened time and time and time and time again. It's just, and while I'm watching this, I'm also witnessing all of my friends, colleagues, former colleagues, not going through that. I really, honestly, looking back in my career, can I think of anybody that I knew who wasn't arguably a terrible douchebag that didn't, hamstring their own career by, mistreating other people? But I'm talking about the good people that worked hard, the talented artists. All of those years that I spent looking at them working 5-6 years at the same studio. Heck, some of these artists are still there at these studios 10-15 years later. And I barely lasted 2, sometimes only 1. Obviously, there was something faulty in my DNA. Obviously, mommy was too polite. Mommy was too nice and said, oh, Adam, you can be anything you want. Dream big. Show me those dimples. And she should have given me some hard love. She should have told me the truth and not this bullshit that ended up sending me down this endless path of thinking that I was entitled to things that I really wasn't. And I could easily have blamed my lack of success on my lack of effort, but here's the thing. I never stopped trying. One thing I can tell myself with confidence is that I was never lazy about it. I never didn't bother trying. Sure, might have been a couple of weeks or months where I felt like, I need a break. I've been working solid for 3 years without a break and I need a little bit of time off. So I might have taken a little bit advantage of unemployment insurance, but I always got back to it. And I always kept pursuing, and I kept rebuilding, and I kept trying over and over again. And I would trudge through the worst of weather to make a name for myself. I worked hard to present myself well, to build a portfolio that was impressive, that would attract attention. And despite all that effort, fuck all. Or during certain transitional periods in my career, thinking that I needed to have the, quote, perfect bait, as Bobby Chiu would put it, having a portfolio that showed my 2D animation skills and my fantasy art skills and my 3D skills, and my life drawing skills and all these different things. Still not getting any calls. And to answer her question, not only could I relate to that feeling that she was going through, I fucking lived it for decades. And let's put things into perspective. In her single 3-lined paragraph, expression of frustration and reaching out to me for a little bit of commonality, a little bit of solace, a little bit of reassurance. 14 years is a hell of a long time. A lot happens in 14 years. You got to think about the sacrifice, the effort, the stamina that it takes to endure 14 years without any solid sense of stability, with any kind of reassurance and said, you did it, you did the hard work, here you go. 14 years ago, I was the father of a little girl. 14 years ago, I had a little 6-year-old girl named Emily. 14 years later, I'm now a father of 3. Emily's 20. She's finishing college. She's at the home stretch of her illustration education. I've got Chloe, who joined me on my movie review recently, who's 12 now. And I've got a little boy, Lucas. Well, not little anymore. He's going to be eye to eye with me in a couple of months by the looks of it. But he's turning 9 next month. After 14 years, that's a lot. 14 years ago, there was Lucipixel did not exist. Not only my school, my mentorship, my YouTube channel didn't exist. My YouTube channel was born 10 years ago. I had no concept of the idea that I was going to be a YouTuber 14 years ago. But here I am in 2022, and I've got a decade-old YouTube channel and the best community on earth. Just wanted to throw that in there. 14 years is a huge sacrifice. If you think about it, if you think about your career like a career, it might be hard for you to grasp what kind of commitment you're actually making. Because I make the effort, I provide the portfolio, I apply to studios, yes or no, yes, you're cut out, no, you're not cut out. But that's not what a career is. That's not what a real career is. A real career is a relationship. A real career is somebody, is an energy, is a relationship that you have to learn to coexist with, particularly when it comes to an art career. Because, as I've mentioned many times in the past, as you know already, being an artist yourself, an art career requires more than just technical skill or intellectual skill or education. It requires a mastery of your emotional self, because that plays an equally important role in who you are. And furthermore, it's particularly challenging to your emotional self because you tie your emotions into what you create. In order to become a well-rounded artist, you also have to have a strong sense of who you are and allow that sense of self to manifest itself in what you create. You have to learn to know yourself and celebrate yourself. But here's the thing. This is where her email comes in. This is where my experiences come in. That realization did not happen after I found success and stability and now had the mental, emotional freedom and stability to start doing new, fresh things to allow myself to explore myself more fully. No. When I made that decision in my career, I was at my most vulnerable. I was effectively lying face down in the mud, completely defeated, fed up, bitter, frustrated, exhausted, alienated. And I had to make that decision while I was still face down in the mud. I didn't make that decision when I was standing up on my throne saying, oh, finally, I've got some kind of stability. Now, let's start getting creative. No, I had to do it in spite of that. Because I had pursued the whole, safe career, building your technical skills, fitting into certain studios, all that kind of shit. I'd failed at that a million times. And I thought, you know what? Fuck it. What do I have to lose now? As Jim Carrey said, you can fail at doing what you don't love, so you might as well take a chance at what you do. And I think that is the most powerful advice you can give anybody. He gave himself permission, despite what freedom his parents might have offered him. His father was an extremely funny person. Apparently he got his sense of humor from him. He pursued that path for himself. He made that decision for himself. And as a result, he's now regarded as one of the funniest human beings in the history of humankind. And he's earned that title. And as an added bonus, he's Canadian. So there you go. Just got to throw that in there, right? Props to my homeboy. The same thing applies to you. Now, am I telling you, be a rebel and screw the establishment? You do you, and forget what anybody says. No, there's a balance to this. You do need to educate yourself. You do need a solid sense of fundamentals. You do need to learn the vocabulary of art so you can start to express yourself in your way. But when all of that's passed, once you've reached that level of confidence in your artwork where you can express yourself fully, it's at that point that you need to revisit your little nerdy, geeky self and say, who am I? And when you do that, you're going to realize that that little nerdy ADHD kid, or that little nerdy introverted dopey kid, or that little nerdy nerd kid who played a lot of tabletop RPGs with her big brother, is the bread and butter of your future. That is the catalyst to you becoming a true master of what you want to become. So where you realize that all of those things that you nerded out with as a kid, be it Sailor Moon or Yu-Gi-Oh or or Beyblades or Scooby-Doo or whatever it is, whatever excited you as a kid, whatever inspired you as a kid, that shit starts to matter again. All of these little things as a kid that I grew up loving, I abandoned that in the name of what I felt was a better practical decision, is what I felt was a more lucrative, more stable career choice, pursuing skills and art styles that I felt were more catchy. But here's the thing, because my heart wasn't a part of it, I never got particularly good at it. I got functionally good enough sometimes, but I never belonged. I never felt that sense of belonging. I've described in the past working at Electronic Arts, and I remember a bunch of guys nerding out over some 3D tracking software, which was arguably really, really cool. And they were all just, eyes, huge, glistening, shiny eyes looking at this going, wow, isn't this the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life? And me sitting in the back going, I authentically, genuinely, at my core, don't give a shit. It does nothing for me. And I really felt, it was like a scene in The Office, just that camera zooms in on my face, looking and feeling extremely awkward, and feeling like these are not my kindred spirits, albeit there were a lot of people there that I worked with that I absolutely loved, some wonderful colleagues. But on that spiritual level, artistic level, no. And then in that same breath, walking into the Cégep of Old Montreal and falling in love with every one of them, every single one of them, just walking in, different teachers of different ages, some younger than me, some older than me, some that had been in it for 50, 60 years, and just being in love. And always feeling that sense of belonging, always feeling like I fit in. And although at that particular point in my life, I was moving away from animation, which is what this course was all about. It was teaching classical film animation, and I loved teaching animation. I knew in my core I didn't want to have a career in animation. I was more interested in fantasy illustration and concept art and that kind of stuff, the kind of stuff I do today. But I definitely felt, I discovered the importance of love in what it is that you do. Either love who you're working with, love what you're doing, but that love has to exist because that's where mastery comes from. That's where your community comes from. One of the things that I put so much energy and so much focus into when I'm doing consultations with artists, or if I'm teaching classes with artists, is filtering through a lot of that doubt that might be coming at me from students, from artists, where they're sitting there going, I'm practicing this and that and everything, and filtering through all of it and looking at them and saying, who are you at your core? What are you all about? And furthermore, looking at the art that they produce, being able to look at art, whether you're a bare bones beginner or somebody who's been doing this for the last 40, 50 years, and looking at it and going, what is this artist gifted at? And how well does this artist recognize that gift? And I can say with absolute certainty, if you look for it, you can find genius in every single artist. I find the biggest issue with a lot of artists is that they don't recognize it. They don't know. They're so clouded by influence. They're so clouded by gifted artists from all different walks of life that they have completely lost their sense of self. They've lost their sense of what they're particularly good at. And the simple answer to that, if you find yourself in this situation right now, the simple answer to that is twofold. One, if you're brand new to art and you're still struggling to learn the fundamentals, then that's the first thing you need to do. The problem might be you haven't learned the language of art yet. You don't know how to communicate visually yet. So focus on that. And don't worry about all this other crap I'm talking about. But once you've reached a point in your artistic career where you do feel confident, when you can make a mark on a page, when you can play around with values and colors in a way that feels very intuitive to you, that's when you need to start rediscovering yourself. And that's where you need to start really paying attention. And that's what my dear friend did for me. She reminded me of who I was. She reminded me of everything that it took to get to where I was today. All of those little things that I'd taken for granted, all those little struggles I went through in my career, all of these countless days and months and years of doubt, of being broke, of being the oddball out that wasn't working in the studio, constantly deeply questioning whether or not I'd made the right choice, whether or not I was just an imposter, that I didn't have what it took. And I can look back at my career now in hindsight and say, well, one of the first mistakes I made was trying to fit in to cliques that I didn't belong in. I realized that I wasn't the fitting in type in that sense. I was more of the creating your own career path type. And that I'd always excelled at doing my own thing, but took for granted the fact that doing my own thing was good enough because, well, I didn't have a good sense of self. I hadn't yet learned who I was yet. I didn't realize what my calling was as a teacher and as somebody to start his own business and do his own thing and create his own community rather than trying and failing at fitting into other communities. I don't have to put on a face. I don't have to pretend. And when I meet students, when we meet each other for the first time, or if I have consultations with people, they very often express the same thing. I feel like I know you already, even though we've never technically met. And the reason being is because I've already introduced myself to you a million times. I'm introducing you to the real self right now. It took many years to embrace just being plain old me and just sharing my thoughts and feelings with you. But when somebody's not handing you a paycheck, when being you is not getting you paid, it's very easy to fall in that trap of feeling like, well, obviously me is not good enough. Obviously me might be fine for my mommy and my daddy and my friends, but it's not good enough for that studio. They're not hiring me. They're not paying me. I'm broke. I'm reaching into the hole in my winter coat, trying to find change in the lining too. And it really fucking sucks. And I'm tired of this. And fuck you, Adam, for filling me with false hopes because it ain't working. Here's the irony of it though. You don't get paid. You don't get paid to learn how to be great at art. You get paid for being great at art. And you think being great at art is something that happens overnight? You think being great at art is something that happens in a year or two? No. It takes a long time. Sometimes it takes half a lifetime. And through that half a lifetime, you might be granted the courtesy of some employers that give you a chance and might hire you and help give you sufficient skills to get work. But maybe not. And that's just a part of it, because it's not just a set skill. You're developing your own style. You're developing your own brand, your own look, and that's incredibly challenging to do. You're not just rehashing the same skills somebody else is doing. You're not reading from the same manual. Maybe the bare fundamentals are, but 99% of what being an artist is, of developing a brand, is finding that voice, finding that style. Don't be so hard on yourself. That's not easy to do. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of practice. And it takes days of doubt. If you're that person who's not feeling that success, I want you to know, from somebody who's at a point in his life right now where I do feel that stability now, maybe not in a couple of years, who knows? But right now, things are going pretty good for me. Understand that just because you're not getting a paycheck, just because you're not getting that call, just because you're not getting that recognition, just because you don't have that stability, does not by any stretch of the imagination mean that you're not cut out for it. In fact, if we come back to the whole talk about the relationship you have with your artistic career, if I put the word relationship into this mix, we are generally hardest on those who we love. And the ones that we love are very often hard on us, because when we bring love into our life, when we bring a relationship into our life, we hold that relationship to a much higher standard than we do anybody else. That's why it's very easy, if there's some house party and somebody's husband or wife is being a complete douchebag, we can kind of brush it off and go, whatever. But if you have to live with that douchebag, it's a totally different story. Well, you have to live with your art career. And you're not always going to get along with it. Sometimes you're going to get into fights. Sometimes you're going to find yourself turning around and giving your back in bed to your art career. And that's just life. But when you love somebody, you will eventually turn around. When you love somebody, you won't get out of that bed. You'll tough it out. You'll feel down for a little while. But then you will come back. And you will give it another try. And you might give it another 1,000 tries just to make it work. So don't be so hard on yourself. You absolutely do belong. Just stick it out. Okay? With that said, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.